what if the career you're working toward doesn't actually require the degree you're about to pay for? And why are you going to school in the first place? And why are you going to graduate school? Why now? And what do you actually expect on the other side of the degree? Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Price, and I'd like to welcome you back to Intentional Musicianship, where we talk about everything that leads to center stage, and sometimes the decisions that happen long before we ever step onto it. Today's episode is a little bit more personal, not because I'm trying to convince anyone of anything, I'm really not, but because I think I know some of you that I'm talking to. I see you at concerts, I talk to you at different conferences, I meet you in hallways, lobbies, parking lots after performances, and I watch you, the people I care about, wrestle with these kind of big decisions about school, graduate school, training paths, money, identity, all of it. And I just wanted to offer my 2 cents. Not as a rule book, not as a checklist, but as a way of thinking critically and intentionally about education and the lives we're trying to build through music. I want to be clear about why I'm doing this episode. This isn't really about degrees, and it's not about telling anyone what they should or shouldn't do. It's about the fact that education decisions quietly shape so much of a musician's life. What work you can take, how much risk you can afford, how flexible your future is, and even how free you feel when you walk on stage. And yet, we often talk about school and degrees as if they're just boxes to check along the way, not long-term investments that affect performance, pressure, and possibility. This episode is designed to sort of help slow things down a little bit, to invite a little bit more intentionality, a little more honesty, and a little more future thinking into decisions that can be very hard to undo. Let me say another thing. Education has value. Training has value. Degrees have value. And this episode isn't questioning whether school matters. It's about asking whether the way we're investing in education aligns with the life we want to live. Every decision you make will take you somewhere. None of them are necessarily bad decisions, but they are different decisions. And different decisions come with different costs, timelines, expectations, and consequences, especially those financial ones. In case it's your first time listening, I have a bachelor's and master's degree in music performance. I also have graduate training in human resource management. I have a master's certificate and a master's degree in human resources, and I'm considered an expert in that field. I have a senior certification in HR, and because of that mix, when I look at school, whether undergraduate, graduate, or professional training, I don't just see passion, artistry, or tradition. I see things like economics, incentives, career systems, and long-term outcomes. Now, that doesn't make me less of an artist. I've been there and I've done that. It just means I ask a few more questions before I commit time, money, and energy to something. The first question I always want people to ask themselves is simple. Why am I going to school or going back to school? And why am I doing it right now? Not someday, not because it feels like the next step, right now. What is this degree or program supposed to allow you to do? Are you being overpromised something that's going to underdeliver? And are you currently doing what your last level of training was designed to prepare you for? If the answer is not really or I'm not sure, that doesn't mean you failed, but it does mean the next step deserves careful thought, because getting another degree doesn't automatically clarify direction. Sometimes it delays clarity. And then there are some very practical follow-up questions with all of this. How much debt do I already carry? Who is paying for this next step? What happens if this degree doesn't produce the outcome I'm imagining? Now, these aren't negative questions. They're adulting questions. It's your life. You get to choose, but you also have to live with the outcomes, good and those that make things a little bit more challenging. Owning that is empowering. Now, for my second question, it naturally follows. So what? What is this school, degree, or training path actually expected to return to you? Not just artistically, but practically. Return on investment matters in every field. Loans and debt don't live in isolation. They affect where you can live, what jobs you can say yes or no to, how much risk you can afford to take, how flexible your life can be. Debt has a way of quietly shaping your life long after graduation day. And this is important to say out loud. A degree does not answer what your dreams are. It might support them, it might enable them, but it doesn't define them. A friend of mine recently wrote an article with a title that really stuck with me. The degree is not the career. It never was. I'll post this in my show notes. I think this title premise matters a lot in music. Some degree paths are more pipeline oriented. Others are far more initiative driven. You see, my friend went through a business program and later earned an MBA. And what stood out wasn't the content of what he learned, it was the infrastructure. So his school invested heavily in the transition from education to employment. That meant structured job fairs, advisors with deep industry relationships, faculty who didn't just teach, they connected, advocated, and opened doors. And that's not about talent, that's about systems. Now, he also has a music degree, and while many music programs do a phenomenal job training artists, they often assume that if you're good enough, the rest will work itself out. And hey, sometimes it does. I'm an example of that. Sometimes it doesn't. Not because you failed, but because the system wasn't designed to carry you across the gap in the same way as that business degree setup that he had seen with his MBA. That's why return on investment matters, not just asking, is this education good? Ask yourself, what support exists after the final school performance is over? What happens after that degree? In many ways, music degrees of all kinds are far more initiative driven. Music education, especially the K through 12, can look more linear on paper. You can say, hey, I got my certification, I get placed in a school, and I have a clearer starting structure when I go into that field. But even there, careers evolved. There are a lot of different options. You got elementary, middle, and high school levels. You got general music, band, orchestra, choir, show choir. So many choices within all of that. And then you got to think about how life happens. People change schools. They move into leadership positions. They take on different roles and priorities over time. Some people with education degrees realized they didn't really like kids. They were just following the path along with everybody else because they were good at music and they just went along the way. Many other people have music degrees in performance, composition, industry, creative work. And you know what? Those were never linear to begin with. Those careers are built through initiative, relationships, seizing opportunities, a willingness to create work instead of waiting for it. That doesn't make those degrees less valuable. It just means the degree doesn't do the work for you. So this has me thinking of so many young friends that are gravitating to graduate school right after undergraduate studies. And I want to say, hey, graduate school can be very valuable. It can be transformative. In education, we know it often correlates to higher salary on the pay scale. And we know that different degree programs and different things, they can open doors to other areas. One thing to remember, how it's paid for will also matter. Have you already set aside the money for this? Are you planning to work through school? You got assistantships, scholarships, employer support. These change the equation on what you're going through. That debt that you might have in the past changes the equation too. The same degree can feel freeing in one financial context and limiting in another. Now, I love my graduate experiences. I also wouldn't make every decision in the same way today. That's not regret, that's perspective. Many musicians eventually discover that their careers are inherently entrepreneurial. There often isn't a built-in pipeline. There isn't automatic placement. There isn't a single job waiting at the end. Which means musicians have to build networks, creative opportunities, translate their skills, advocate for their value. That's not a flaw in music, it's the reality of the profession. Understanding that earlier helps people make calmer, clearer decisions about education, debt, and timing. I think about this often. When I was younger, I wanted to join an Army National Guard band, the largest employer of musicians in the United States. I was too scared. But it's funny because then a few years later, I actually joined the Army as a musician and I made a career out of it. And I did that after earning a bachelor's and master's degree. The education mattered, but it wasn't the only door. I had friends who took different paths, whether it be in education, film, recording, retail music, performance, the military, even healthcare. No path was wrong about how they used their degrees and their trainings, but every path had consequences, good and some challenging. Knowing the options earlier might have changed the timing, cost, and pressure that went along with it. So in the end, this episode isn't about second-guessing past decisions. It's about helping you own the future ones. Remember, education is a tool. Training is a tool. Degrees are tools. None of them are automatically good or bad, and they don't automatically answer what kind of life you want. That part is still yours to define. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If this school or degree doesn't lead exactly where you hope, does it still support the life you want to live? If yes, great, move along. If no, that's information worth listening to. Talk with people you trust, talk with people already doing the work, build a team around you, because no one makes wise decisions in isolation. And I'll end with this. If you truly love music, it's not going to leave you. You'll always find ways to stay connected, performing, teaching, mentoring, supporting, listening, and creating. For me, that looks like this podcast, going to concerts, and still performing when I'm able. Music is bigger than any single degree or credential. Again, this episode isn't about stopping anyone. It's about helping you think clearly, investing wisely, and moving forward with intention. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of Intentional Musicianship. So often the hardest part of decisions around school or graduate school isn't the coursework or the audition process. It's understanding what we're really hoping that degree will do for our lives and whether we've given ourselves space to think that through honestly. If this experience sounds familiar, or if you've seen it in yourself or in your students, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your stories. You can find me at intentionalmusicianship.com. I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. Thanks again for spending a few minutes thinking with me today. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of Intentional Musicianship.